After my husband's funeral, I said absolutely nothing about the $50 million inheritance and the mansion in Italy. I stayed completely silent while everyone cried and muttered about what would happen next. I kept quiet when my daughter-in-law, Chloe, started talking about reorganizing the house and new beginnings. I didn't open my mouth when I noticed the looks she and my son David exchanged. Those looks filled with plans that did not include me. Returning home after the burial, still in the grey dress I had worn to the cemetery, I heard the words I never imagined hearing from my own son. David, the baby I brought into the world 40 years ago. The boy I nursed and cared for through every feverish night, looked at me with cold eyes and screamed, "Pack your junk and get out. Your place is on the street." I simply lowered my head in silence. I felt my hands trembling, felt the air grow heavy in my lungs. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything forever. But before I tell you what I did, before I reveal the secret I was keeping in my purse at that very moment, I need to take you back in time. I need you to understand who I was, who Harold was, and how we built everything they believed was theirs. It was 1978 when I met Harold. I was 22 years old and working in a small bakery in downtown Philadelphia. My hands smelled of flour all the time. My feet ached at the end of every shift. But it was honest work. Harold came in every morning at 7. He always ordered the same thing: a black coffee and fresh baked bread. For 3 months, we only exchanged good mornings and shy smiles. Those smiles that say more than words ever could. Until one rainy day, when he saw me leave work without an umbrella, he offered me his. We walked together under that fine rain, just enough to feel the cold on my skin. In those 15 minutes, I discovered he had a dream to build his own import company. He had no money, barely a small rented space in the industrial zone, but he had something that shone in his eyes. He had hope, he had ambition, and he had a heart that beat at the same rhythm as mine. We got married 6 months later in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church. My dress was ivory, bought from a thrift store. But when Harold looked at me that day, I felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. We had next to nothing. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment where the paint was peeling off the walls and the hot water only worked in the mornings. But we were happy. My God! We were so happy. I quit the bakery and started working with him. In the beginning, it was just the two of us. I answered the phone, did the invoices, cleaned the office, and prepared coffee for clients. Harold went out looking for contracts, convincing businessmen that he could get them the best products from Europe at the best prices. We worked 16 hours a day, ate sandwiches at the desk, and at night, when we finally got home, we would hold each other in the narrow bed and plan our future. 3 years later, David was born. I remember the exact moment I saw him for the first time. He had his father's eyes and my small nose. Harold cried when he held him. He cried like a child. He promised me that day that he would build an empire for us, that our son would never experience the hardships we had. And he kept his promise. Little by little, the company grew. From 1 employee, we went to 5, then to 20, then to 50. I continued working. Even with a small David, I brought him to the office in his stroller, nursed him between meetings. and changed his diapers in the bathroom that also served as a storage room. We were a team, Harold and I. Every decision we made together, every risk we faced, hand in hand. When David was 10 years old, we bought our first house. It wasn't big, but it had a yard where he could play and windows that let the sun in every morning. I remember the day we moved. Harold carried me across the threshold, just like on our wedding day, and the three of us sat on the empty living room floor, eating pizza and laughing at the absurdity of having so much space. The years passed quickly. David grew up. The company continued to grow. Harold travelled more. I made sure the house was a home he wanted to return to. I cooked his favourite dishes, kept his clothes ironed, and listened to his concerns every night before bed. We were more than husband and wife. We were life partners, partners in every sense. And then when David was 27 years old, he met Chloe. The first time I saw her, I thought she was charming. She came home with a wide smile and a beige dress that highlighted her slim figure. She hugged me and called me Mom Evelyn from the start. She brought flowers for me and a bottle of wine for Harold. She told us about her family, her studies in administration, and how much she loved our son. Harold squeezed my hand under the table that night. I returned the gesture. We both wanted to believe David had found someone special. We wanted to believe our family was growing in the right way. They got married a year later. The wedding was big, elegant, in a ballroom with crystal chandeliers and tables decorated with white roses. I wore a champagne-coloured dress and danced with my son while Harold watched us with tears in his eyes. Everything seemed perfect. Everything seemed as it should be. But perfect things, I discovered later, almost never truly are. The first months after the wedding were quiet. David and Chloe lived in their own apartment, came for dinner on Sundays, and everything seemed to function like a normal family. Chloe helped me in the kitchen, asked for recipes, and told me about her job at a marketing firm. I wanted to believe I had found not just a daughter-in-law, but a daughter. But there were small things. Things so subtle that at first I thought it was my imagination. Comments that sounded like compliments but left a sharp sting. "Oh, Mum, Evelyn, your blouse is so pretty. It's so vintage. So from another era." Or when I serve dinner, "This looks delicious, although I prefer to cook lighter. You know, for health." Always with a smile. Always with that sweet tone that made it impossible to object without sounding like the bitter mother-in-law. Harold didn't notice either. Or maybe he didn't want to notice. He was so happy to see David married, so proud of his son, that he dismissed anything I mentioned with a kiss on the forehead and an, "Honey, you're seeing things that aren't there." 2 years after the wedding, David came with news. He and Chloe wanted to move into our house. Only temporarily, my son said without looking me directly in the eyes. "We're saving up to buy something better. And you know this house is huge. You have 4 empty rooms. It would be perfect." I looked at Harold. He was already nodding. "Son, this is your house, too. It always will be." I didn't say anything. What could I say? He was my son. It was our family. I was supposed to be happy to have them close. They moved in a week later, and with them came the change. Chloe started reorganizing things. Evelyn, don't you think this furniture is very old-fashioned? We should modernize a little. She replaced the living room curtains. Those cream-colored curtains I had chosen so carefully, with grey, minimalist ones. She moved the paintings Harold and I had bought on our travels. These landscapes are so depressing. Mother-in-law, the house needs more light, more cheer. She started cooking herself. Rest. Evelyn, you've done enough in your life. Let me spoil the men of the house. And so, little by little, I ceased to be necessary in my own kitchen. Harold ate what Chloe prepared and said it was delicious. David didn't even ask about my dishes. Family dinners changed. Now they talked about things I didn't understand. Apps, social media, crypto investments. When I tried to join the conversation, Chloe smiled condescendingly. Oh, mother-in-law, these things are very complicated. Don't worry about understanding them. David began to see me differently. I was no longer Mom. I was Evelyn, as if the title of mother had evaporated along with my place at the table. When I asked him about his day, he responded in monosyllables. When I tried to hug him, he stiffened. Harold was working more than ever. At 65 years old, he still went to the office every day, closing deals, expanding the business. It wasn't the first time they had spoken to her that way. But something inside her was beginning to make noise. A new noise, as if there was no room for more resignation inside. Diane placed a plate of cold rice and half a bruised banana on the table. Here, if you don't like it. There's old bread in the pantry. But don't you go making demands. Okay? Eleanor didn't say anything. She walked slowly to the table, sat down, and began to eat in silence. The rice tasted like nothing. The banana had black spots. We worked so hard. Evelyn. So hard. But it was worth it. Right? Look at everything we have. Look at our family. I nodded and leaned my head on his shoulder. But inside something was breaking. Months passed. Temporarily turned into a year. Then 2. Chloe no longer asked if she could change things. She simply did. She hired a maid. So, you don't have to get tired cleaning. Mother-in-law. But the truth is, I no longer had anything to do. The maid cooked, cleaned, did laundry. I became a guest in my own home. I started spending more time in my room. I read books, looked out the window, remembered the days when this house was full of laughter and purpose. Sometimes I went down to the kitchen at midnight when everyone was asleep just to feel like I still belonged somewhere. One afternoon, 3 years after they moved in with us, I heard Chloe talking on the phone in the living room. I was going down the stairs when I heard my name. No. Mom. I swear I can't stand it anymore. Living with her is unbearable. She's always there, always watching everything I do. It's like having a shadow that never leaves. She paused. Yes, I know she's David's mom, but he's already on my side. It's only a matter of time when the old man, you know, when the inevitable happens. This house is going to be ours. And then, yes, we'll live the way we want. I froze on the stairs. My heart was pounding so hard against my chest that I thought I would faint. The old man. That's what she called Harold. And she talked about when the inevitable happens, as if she were waiting for it, as if she were counting the days. I went back up to my room without making a sound. I sat on the bed and cried silently, covering my mouth with my hands so no one would hear me. That night, when Harold got home from work, I hugged him tighter than ever. He laughed. "What's wrong?" "My love, did you miss me that much?" "I always miss you," I said. And it was true. I missed the man I built everything with. I missed when it was just the two of us against the world. He stroked my hair. "I'm tired, Evelyn. Very tired. Sometimes I think about retiring, selling everything, and going to live somewhere quiet. Just you and me. Like before." "What about David?" I asked. Harold sighed. "David is a grown man. He has his wife. He has his life. He doesn't need us like before." But we didn't go anywhere. The days kept passing, each one heavier than the last. And then, 6 months after that conversation in the yard, Harold started feeling unwell. At first, it was headaches. Harold ignored them, saying it was stress, that he hadn't slept well. I insisted he go to the doctor, but he just told me I was overreacting. "They're just aches." "My love, it's normal at our age." But I knew him. I knew every gesture on his face, every change in his voice. And I knew something wasn't right. One morning, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "Harold, what's wrong?" I asked, kneeling in front of him. He looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. "It hurts so much, Evelyn. So much." That same afternoon, I took him to the hospital. The tests began. MRIs, blood work, X-rays. 2 weeks later, the doctor called us into his office. I remember every detail of that moment. The mint green walls, the smell of disinfectant, the clock on the wall that read 3:15 inches the afternoon. "Mr. Harold, Mrs. Evelyn," the doctor began. And from his tone of voice, I knew the news wouldn't be good. "The results show a brain tumor. It's large and in a complicated position." The world stopped. Harold squeezed my hand so hard I felt my bones creak. "Is it curable?" he asked, his voice trembling. The doctor looked down. "We can try treatment. But I must be honest with you. The odds are not high. We are talking about months. Maybe a year if the treatment works." We left the hospital in silence. In the car, Harold broke down crying. My husband, the man who had always been so strong, so sure of himself, was crying like a child. I hugged him while driving with one hand, trying to stay strong for both of us. When we got home, David and Chloe were in the living room watching television. "How did it go?" my son asked without getting off the sofa, without even looking directly at us. "We have to talk," Harold said, his voice cracking. We told them. I watched David's face go pale, saw him get up to hug his father. Dad. No. It can't be. We'll find the best treatment. The best doctors. You're not going anywhere. Chloe remained seated with an expression I couldn't decipher. What terrible news, she finally said. But her voice sounded hollow, empty of real emotion. The treatment began. Chemotherapy, radiation, medications that left him weak and dizzy. I dropped everything to care for him. I became his nurse, his constant companion. I gave him his medicine at the exact times, went with him to every medical appointment, held him when he vomited, and wiped the sweat from his forehead when fevers struck in the middle of the night. David came to visit, but less and less often. I have a lot of work. Mom, he said, you know how things are at the office. The office his father had built, the company that would someday be his, but which now didn't seem important enough for him to take a day off to be with the man who gave him everything. Chloe almost never came up to our room. I'm just so unnerved seeing him like that. She told me once, I prefer to remember him as he was before, as if Harold were already dead, as if he were just a memory. The nights were the worst. Harold couldn't sleep because of the pain. I stayed awake with him, holding his hand, telling him stories of our early years together. Remember when we lived in that awful apartment and the heat broke in the winter? I would say. He smiled weakly. And you made hot cocoa and we just held each other all night. We were so happy, he whispered. With so little. We were so happy. One night, 3 months after the diagnosis, Harold asked me to call his lawyer. I need to take care of some things. Evelyn, it's important. The next day, Mr. Thompson, the lawyer who had worked with us for 20 years, came over. They locked themselves in the study for 2 hours. When he came out, Mr. Thompson looked at me with a serious expression. Evelyn, Harold loves you very much. Everything he is doing is for you. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. That night, as I gave him his medicine, Harold took my hand. My love, I need you to promise me something. Anything, I said. When I'm gone, promise me you'll be strong. Promise me you won't let anyone make you feel less than you are. You built all this with me. All of it. Never forget that. Don't talk like that, I said, tears in my eyes. You're going to get better. You're going to get through this. He shook his head slowly. We both know I'm not. But it's okay. I've lived a wonderful life by your side. I don't regret anything. He paused. Well, maybe I regret not being tougher with some people, not protecting what was ours better. I didn't know how to respond. I hugged him and we stayed that way until he fell asleep. The following months were a slow, painful deterioration. Harold lost weight, lost hair, lost strength, but he never lost his love for me. Every morning, no matter how bad he felt, he would say, "Good morning, my beautiful love." And I would smile and tell him I loved him, even though inside I was dying along with him. David came less and less. Now he only appeared on Sundays, stayed 10 minutes, and left, saying he had engagements. Chloe stopped coming altogether. "It's too depressing," she told David, and I heard it from the hallway. "I can't be in that house seeing that. It's morbid." One afternoon, Harold asked me to sit beside him. He was very weak, barely able to speak. But his eyes were still the same eyes that fell in love with me 45 years ago. "Evelyn," he whispered, "in the top drawer of my desk, there is an envelope. It's for you. Open it when I'm gone. And remember what I told you. You are stronger than you think." He insisted with the little strength he had left. "Harold, please promise me." "I promise," I said, crying. He smiled. "That's my warrior. The woman who worked side by side with me. The woman who never gave up. That's you. Never forget it." 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, Harold stopped breathing. I was by his side, holding his hand. I felt the exact moment he left. 1 second he was there, and the next he wasn't. I didn't scream. I didn't cry immediately. I just sat next to him, stroking his face, memorizing every wrinkle, every detail, because I knew that would be the last time I would see him like that. At peace, as if he were only sleeping. When I finally went downstairs to tell them, I found David and Chloe having breakfast in the kitchen. "Dad is gone," I said, my voice flat. David dropped his coffee cup. Chloe remained motionless, but I noticed something in her gaze, something that looked almost like relief. The funeral was 3 days later. The funeral was in a large church downtown, the same one where we had gotten married 45 years ago. Hundreds of people came. Company employees, business partners, lifelong friends, neighbors. Everyone wanted to say goodbye to Harold, the man who had built an empire from nothing, the generous man who helped anyone who needed it. I was in the front row, dressed in dark grey, my hands clasped in my lap. David was on my right, his eyes red from crying so much. Chloe was next to him in an elegant black dress and perfect makeup, dabbing tears that I wasn't sure were real. During the ceremony, several people approached to offer their condolences. "Evelyn, we are so sorry. He was a great man. He always spoke of you with so much love." I nodded, thanked them. But the words reached me as if from far away, as if I were underwater. At some point, I heard 2 women whispering behind me. They couldn't have known I was listening. "Poor Evelyn. What will she do now without Harold? Surely the son will take care of everything. At least she has that." If only they knew. After the religious ceremony, we went to the cemetery. The sky was grey. It threatened rain, but it never fell. I watched the casket as it was lowered into the earth and thought of all the times Harold and I had talked about growing old together, seeing our grandchildren grow up, travelling the world when he finally retired. All those plans now buried with him. David placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, it's time to go." I shook my head. "A few more minutes. Please." He sighed, but left me there. I stayed alone in front of the grave until everyone left. I spoke silently to Harold, told him how much I loved him, how much I would miss him, how I didn't know how I would live without him. And in the midst of that pain, I remembered his last words. You are stronger than you think. In the car on the way back home, Chloe was in the front with David. I was in the back looking out the window. I heard her tell my son in a low voice, "Now we have to talk about practical things. Honey. The house. The company. Everything needs to be reorganized." David mumbled, something I couldn't hear. When we arrived at the house, people were waiting. We had prepared refreshments for the funeral attendees. The living room was full of people eating, conversing quietly, sharing anecdotes about Harold. I sat in a dining room chair and let everything happen around me. Chloe moved through the house like the perfect hostess. She served coffee, offered food, and thanked people for coming, as if she already owned the place, as if I no longer existed. I saw Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, standing in a corner. Our eyes met, and he nodded slightly. There was something in his eyes, something that seemed to say, "Be patient." But I didn't understand what he meant. The hours passed slowly. People began to leave as night fell. "If you need anything at all, call us," they told me. I thanked them and saw them out the door. Finally, only David, Chloe, and I remained. I went up to my bedroom, the room I had shared with Harold for so many years. Everything still smelled of him. His robe hanging behind the door, his slippers next to the bed, his book on the nightstand marked at page 19, which he would never finish reading. I sat on the bed, and for the first time all day, I cried. I cried until I had no more tears, until my body ached from sobbing so much. I lay down on his side of the bed, hugged his pillow, and tried to sleep. I don't know how much time passed. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. I was in that state between sleep and wakefulness when I heard voices downstairs. Voices that weren't trying to be quiet. I got up and opened my bedroom door. The voices were coming from the living room. "It's the perfect time," Chloe was saying. "Call the lawyer tomorrow and start the process. This house needs to be in your name as soon as possible." "I don't know. Chloe, we just buried my dad. Don't you think it's too soon?" Chloe's voice rose. "Too soon, David. We've been living with your mother, breathing down our necks for 3 years. 3 years we've been waiting. It's time for this house to be ours. Besides, what's she going to do alone in such a big place? The logical thing is for her to move to a smaller place, more appropriate for her age." "She's my mother," David said. But his voice sounded weak, without conviction. "And you're her only son, the heir. Everything your father built is for you, not for her. She's lived her life. Now it's our turn." I felt something freeze inside my chest. I stood there in the dark hallway listening to my daughter-in-law planning my life as if I were a piece of furniture that needed to be relocated. "And the company," Chloe continued. "You have to take immediate control. Surely your father left everything in order for you to be the new CEO. We need to act fast before the partners start asking questions or wanting to make decisions." "I guess you're right," David finally said. "Of course I'm right. I always am." She paused. "And about your mother, I think it's best to be clear with her. Make her understand that things are going to change. That this is our house now. And if she wants to stay, she'll have to accept our rules. Although, honestly, I think it would be better for everyone to find her own place. I returned to my room with silent steps. I sat on the bed, trembling. The pain of the funeral, the emptiness of having lost Harold now mixed with something else. Betrayal. My own son, the child I carried in my womb, who I raised with all my love, was planning to kick me out of my house before his father's body was cold in the grave. I looked towards Harold's desk. I remembered his words. In the top drawer of my desk, there is an envelope. It's for you. Open it when I'm gone. I got up and walked toward the desk. I opened the top drawer. There it was. A white envelope with my name written in Harold's shaky handwriting. I took it with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a letter and a small key. I started to read. My beloved Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Forgive me for not having the courage to tell you in person. But I needed to make sure you were protected. 10 years ago, when Chloe entered our lives, something told me I needed to take precautions. Call it intuition or a simple old businessman's common sense. I transferred all our assets to your name. The house. The mansion in Italy that I bought as a surprise for our anniversary and never got to show you. The bank accounts. The investments. Everything totals approximately $50 million. David will receive a share. Of course. But only when you decide, and under the conditions you set. The company is structured so that no one can make decisions without your approval. This key opens a safe deposit box at the bank. The number is on the envelope. Mr. Thompson knows everything and will help you with whatever you need. Forgive me if this seems cruel toward our son, but a father must protect his family, even from themselves. Be strong, my love. Be the warrior woman you have always been. And remember, we built it together. It is as much yours as it is mine. I love you forever. Harold. I read the letter 3 times. My hands stopped trembling. My breathing deepened. For the first time since Harold died, I felt something other than pain. I felt clarity. I put the letter and the key in my purse. I washed my face, combed my hair, and went downstairs. It was time to face what was coming. When I went downstairs, it was almost 11 at night. The house was silent. David and Chloe must have finished their conversation and gone up to their room. I headed to the kitchen. I needed tea. Something hot to calm the tremor I still felt in my body, despite the clarity Harold's letter had given me. While I waited for the water to boil, I sat at the table and reread the letter. Every word. Every line. Be strong, my love. Be the warrior woman you have always been. Tears rolled down my cheeks. But this time they weren't just tears of sadness. There was something else in them. Gratitude, love, and a determination I hadn't felt in years. Harold had protected me. Even in his death, even knowing he wouldn't be here to defend me, he had found a way to care for me. He had seen what I didn't want to see. He had acted when I was blind with maternal love. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I had heard, everything I now knew. I didn't feel rage. Curiously, I felt a strange calm, as if after years of being lost in the fog, I could finally see the path. The next day, I woke up early. I took a long shower, dressed carefully, choosing comfortable but presentable clothes. When I went downstairs, David was already in the kitchen drinking coffee. He was surprised to see me. "Mum, I thought you'd sleep late. Yesterday was a really tough day." "I've had tougher days," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Where is Chloe?" "Upstairs, getting ready. We have to leave early. There are a lot of things to sort out at the company." I sat across from him. "David, have you thought about how you feel? I know you've been very busy with everything, but your father just died. It's okay to take some time." He avoided my gaze. "Business doesn't wait. Mum, Dad taught me that. Someone has to take the reins. Your father also taught me that family comes first," I said softly. David stood up, uncomfortable. "I have to go. We'll talk later." And he left the kitchen without finishing his coffee. Minutes later, Chloe came downstairs. She was dressed in a pearl grey suit, high heels, and impeccable makeup. She looked me up and down with that smile I knew so well. "Good morning, Evelyn. How did you sleep?" "Fine." I lied. "Are you going out?" "Yes. We have an appointment with some of the company executives. David needs to establish his position as the new leader. It's important to do these things quickly. You know, before people start to doubt or look for other options." She poured herself coffee and added, "By the way, I think we should talk soon about the house. About how we're going to organize ourselves now that things have changed." "That sounds fine," I said calmly. "Whenever you want to talk, let me know." She seemed surprised by my quiet tone, but said nothing else. She took her purse and left. As soon as I heard the car pull away, I took my purse and drove to the bank. The branch opened at 9. I arrived 5 minutes early and waited in the parking lot, the safe deposit box key tight in my hand. When they opened, I went in and asked to speak to the manager. "Good morning. I am Evelyn, Harold's wife. I need to access a safe deposit box." The manager, a man about 50 years old with glasses, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Evelyn, my deepest condolences. Mr. Harold was a great man. Of course. Please come with me." He led me to a private room and brought the box. When he opened it with my key, I found several manila envelopes, all labeled in Harold's handwriting. Deeds to the house, deeds to the property in Italy, bank accounts, investments, company structure, the will. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing every document. Every word Harold had written in his letter was true. Everything, absolutely everything, was in my name. The house where we lived, the mansion on the Amalfi Coast he had bought as a surprise for our anniversary, and which I didn't know existed. Accounts in 3 different banks, investments in funds, real estate, stocks. The total value was dizzying. $50,200,000. The company was more complicated. Harold had been smart. He had structured everything so that I was the majority shareholder with 55%. David had 30% and the rest was distributed among key employees. But there was a clause. No important decision could be made without my written approval. The will was clear. David would receive 30% of the company and $5 million in cash. But only after 1 year of Harold's death. And only if I, as the executive of the will, considered him prepared to handle that responsibility. Everything else was mine. There was a personal note attached to the will, dated 3 months before his death. Evelyn, if David proves to be the man we raised, the man of values we always wanted him to be, give him everything. But if he has allowed them to change him, to lead him away from what is right, use your judgment. No one better than you knows what is fair. I trust you completely. I left the bank with all the documents in my pee. Mark didn't sleep at home. Diane didn't show up either. But Kevin did, and it was he who broke the ice. "Are you really going to leave this house like this?" he asked while drinking water from the dispenser. "Without sharing anything?" Eleanor looked up from the patio where she was watering the plants. "Like what?" "Well, just for you. You don't even need that much anymore. We have prolonged cohabitation with hostile people. You want surveillance? Any method that documents their behavior legally. Cameras in the common areas of your own home. Legal. Living room. Kitchen. Hallways. Audio and video. Cloud backup. Access from your phone." She gave me a quote. $5,000 upfront retainer, plus hourly fees. I signed the contract without hesitation. The money was worthless compared to the truth. "I'll need access on Tuesday," she said. "Could you get them out for a couple of hours?" "I'll arrange it." On Tuesday morning, during breakfast, I casually mentioned, "I need some things from that specialty market in Coral Gables. Would you mind picking them up? Maybe we can grab lunch together." I gave them a detailed list. Things from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10. I texted Veronica. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. Cameras were placed on a living room bookshelf, in a kitchen clock above the table, and in a hallway smoke detector. Small, invisible, recording everything. 90 minutes later, installation complete. "Everything completely normal," she stated. "Don't let them know you're watching. The best evidence comes when they feel safe." That night, I sat in my study with headphones on, watching the day's recordings. Their return from the errand. The conversation in the kitchen as they unpacked groceries. "He's too quiet," Elena said, her voice tight with worry. "It's suspicious. We need another approach." Julian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The direct hit didn't work. Time for the indirect hit. I saved the file, dated it, and labeled it Evidence Log Entry 1. The following days allowed me to build my case. February 28th. Julian discussed contingency plans. March 1st. Elena worried that I was acting strangely. March 2nd. They looked up lawyers to challenge my mental competency. March 3rd. Julian's search history showed declarations of parental incapacity. Every conversation was documented, saved, and organized into folders by topic. I watched them conspire against me with the methodical patience of someone building a legal case brick by brick. Veronica sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. I've been feeling so tired lately. Their heads snapped up like bloodhounds on a scent. That night at dinner, I feigned forgetting where I had left my reading glasses. I've been very forgetful. Elena leaned forward, feigning concern. Maybe you should see a doctor. Dad. It's normal at your age, Julian added casually, but it's definitely worth checking out. I nodded, playing the confused old man. Later, reviewing the recording, I saw them celebrate my confession as if it were a gift. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, and hundreds of hours of recording, I opened my phone and found Harrison Cole's number. Tomorrow, we would build a strategy. It was time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, the early symptoms of dementia, and the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. Elena was by the coffee maker watching my reaction. I found this online. I thought it might be helpful to understand what's been happening with you. I picked up the first article and skimmed it with appropriate confusion. I suppose reading wouldn't hurt. Knowledge is power, Julian added from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I took the articles to my study, photographed each page, and filed them as evidence. Psychological manipulation documented. They were constructing a narrative. The confused old man who needed intervention, who couldn't be trusted to handle his own affairs. Over the next 3 days, more articles appeared. Residences for people with dementia. The importance of power of attorney. Financial management for those experiencing cognitive difficulties. Each one was carefully placed where I would find it. Each one was photographed and filed. On March 8th, the surveillance cameras caught them in the living room, believing they were alone. "We need an expert opinion," Julian said. "Someone who can evaluate him professionally." "A psychologist?" Elena's voice held equal parts hope and guilt. "I know someone. Dr. Elias Thorne, a clinical psychologist specializing in elderly cognition. We set up a casual lunch. I introduce them. Elias makes observations. Will he do it ethically? Will he be objective? If your father shows symptoms, Elias documents them. If not, Julian shrugged, then we'll know for sure. I watched this conversation 3 times, taking notes. The tension was escalating. They were seeking external validation for their version of events. On March 10th, I met Julian for lunch at a cafe in Coconut Grove. He had suggested it that morning so we can get to know each other better without the stress of work. And I accepted with appropriate gratitude. Dr. Elias Thorne joined us 15 minutes in. "Hey." This is my friend Elias. I mentioned him. The psychologist. We shook hands. Elias. About 40-something. Professional demeanor. Cautious eyes. Julian told me about you. Successful sale. Congratulations. We talked for an hour. My performance was impeccable. I occasionally searched for words, asked Elias to repeat questions, and commented on my forgetfulness. I didn't exaggerate, just a hint of confusion. Elias maintained professional distance, but I caught him watching me, evaluating, cataloguing. It was a pleasure meeting you, Elias said as lunch ended, handing me his card. If you ever want to discuss professional topics, I'm available. I put the card in my pocket. Evidence, not service. That night, the surveillance cameras recorded Julian calling Elias from the living room. The speakerphone on. What did you think? Julian asked impatiently. He's 63. Some age-appropriate variation in memory isn't unusual. Elias's voice was carefully neutral. I can't make clinical assessments based on an informal lunch conversation. But if there were genuine concerns, I could evaluate him formally, with his consent. Yes. But Julian, I'm not comfortable being part of this. If you have legitimate concerns about his well-being, there are proper channels. Sure. I'm just exploring options. After hanging up, Julian's face darkened. We'll find someone else. I saved that recording with particular satisfaction. Even when they tried to corrupt professionals, ethics intervened. From March 12th to 17th, I continued my performance. Small errors, confusion, repeated questions. On the 15th, at breakfast, I asked Elena about the plans we had discussed the night before, feigning forgetfulness. Her eyes lit up with excitement, barely concealed. The surveillance cameras recorded everything. Their conversations about my decline, Julian researching commitment procedures, Elena worrying that things were moving too slowly. On March 18th, I adjusted my strategy. At dinner, I casually commented that I had been thinking about updating my will. Julian suggested it given the business sale. I want to make sure everything is in order. A dead silence fell. Then Elena, trying to sound nonchalant. That's responsible. Dad. When are you meeting with him? He'll be preparing the documents soon. Making sure you're well taken care of. I left the words hanging in the air. Bait in a trap. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The surveillance cameras recorded them in the kitchen. They spoke in low voices, but the microphone caught everything. He mentioned the will, Elena said, barely containing her hope. That doesn't mean he's changing it in our favor. Julian's voice held a warning. It could be the opposite. But if he really is confused, if we document that he's not competent when making changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more evidence of his decline. Real evidence, not just observations. They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my supposed incompetence. Video, everything. Record strange behavior. Build a case for incapacity that would invalidate any legal change against their interests. I watched them celebrate their cleverness, pouring wine and toasting to progress. They thought they were winning. I closed the laptop, opened my phone, and searched for Harrison Cole's number. 3 weeks of recordings, conversations, plans, attempts at manipulation, psychological warfare, all captured with perfect digital clarity. Tomorrow, we would discuss how weeks of evidence could be turned into a legal strategy, how surveillance could be a tool for pressure, how their own words could destroy them. I had documented their plan with the same methodical patience they had used on mine. Only I had done it better. With more detail. With more strategy. It was time to move to the next phase. It was time to show them what happened when they underestimated a man who built an empire from scratch, who understood that true power lay in preparation, documentation, and knowing exactly when to strike. I texted Harrison, "I have new compelling evidence. Need an urgent meeting." He responded in minutes. "Friday at 10, 0 inches the morning. Bring everything." I hung up the phone. Through the study window, the moonlight painted the lawn silver. In the house around me, they slept soundly, believing they were the architects of my ruin. They had no idea they were building their own. The morning light streamed through the study windows. March 19th at 8, I picked up the phone and dialed Harrison Cole's direct number. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Sterling, your message said you had evidence." Weeks of it. Surveillance recordings. Conversations. Attempts at manipulation. All documented. I need to meet today. This afternoon at 2, bring everything. I spent the morning organizing it. I created a folder on my laptop called Legal Evidence Package. Surveillance files copied, organized by date and severity. Printed transcripts of their most damning conversations. Julian talking about competency challenges. Elena worried about my suspicious silence. Both celebrating their supposed progress toward controlling my assets. Veronica's weekly reports went into a manila envelope, underlined and tabbed. I loaded everything onto 2 USB drives, one for Harrison and one backup. At 2, I sat across from Harrison in his conference room. The USB drive and documents between us, like exhibits in a trial. He watched 3 hours of recording, read all the transcripts, and studied Veronica's behavioral analysis. Finally, he leaned back, fingers interlaced. "This is extensive. Multiple legal options, restraining orders, civil lawsuit, criminal charges for attempted poisoning." He tapped the trust document I had mentioned. "But first, we protect your assets. Irrevocable living trust." How does that work? Assets are transferred to the trust. It becomes an independent legal entity. An independent trustee administers it. You set the conditions for beneficiary access. Once signed, they are untouchable. Not even you can modify them. He pulled out a notepad and began sketching the structure. "We'll make it bulletproof. They won't be able to access it through lawsuits, manipulate the administrators, or effectively challenge it." How long would it take? A week. If we act now, you'll transfer the majority of your assets. Keep enough liquidity for personal use. We'll establish strict conditions for Elena's eventual access. What conditions? Harrison smiled. A sharp professional grin. Whatever you want. Age requirements. Financial independence. Absence of pending lawsuits. In short, any measure that ensures she cannot access the money through coercion or fraud. Over the next 5 days, we built an impenetrable fortress around my wealth. March 20th. Trust structure designed. $25 million transferred to the trust. $5 million kept liquid for my use. Elena could access it at age 45, 9 years from now, if she demonstrated 5 years of financial independence and had no civil or criminal cases against her for financial reasons. On March 23rd, a meeting with Florida Fiduciary Services. 2 fiduciary officers, professional and impartial, explained their role. They would follow this document to the letter. No family pressure. No manipulation. No exceptions. March 24th. Final signing. Harrison's conference room again, but this time with a notary and fiduciary officers present. The documents lay across the table like a treaty ending a war. I signed each page, initialed and dated. The notary officially sealed each signature. Your assets are protected, Harrison said as I put the copies in a leather folder. She cannot manipulate, coerce, or sue you for them. The trust is irrevocable. Case closed. I drove home with a feeling I hadn't felt since February. Power. Control. Security. At home. Life continued its strange theatre. They still knew nothing of the trust. The surveillance cameras recorded their casual conversations about the inheritance. Their certainty that eventually my money would be theirs. March 28th. Breakfast. Buttered toast. Elena mentioned when we inherit, as if it were inevitable. That night, Julian's laptop search history, how to challenge a will in Florida. I decided to tell them on April 1st, an auspicious date for plans to unravel. On March 31st, I texted both of them. Family meeting tomorrow. 10:00 inches the morning. In the living room. Important. Harrison had advised doing it in public or with witnesses. They could become aggressive. My house, I replied. My rules. The cameras would record everything. April 1st arrived. A clear, bright day. I set up my laptop connected to the television with the surveillance footage ready. At 10, they entered the living room. A palpable, nervous energy in the air. I stood. They sat. The sofa was lower than I was, establishing a hierarchy. I have made decisions about my estate. I filed the trust document. I have created an irrevocable living trust. Their attention sharpened. I explained systematically. $25 million transferred. Independent trustee. Conditions of access. Minimum age 45. Financial independence. No pending lawsuits. I watched their faces register comprehension. What? Elena's voice cracked. Are you cutting me out? I am protecting my assets from manipulation. Julian leaped up from the sofa. All this over the restaurant. A mistake. And you? A mistake. I picked up the remote and hit play. Their voices filled the room. Surveillance footage. them talking about my competency issues, planning to document my decline, celebrating their progress toward the inheritance. "You spied on us," Elena cried now. "Your own daughter." I protected myself from those who tried to drug me into signing legal documents. "We're going to sue." Julian stepped forward, poorly disguising his aggression. "We're going to challenge this." "You can't. It's irrevocable. It's done. Legally bulletproof." I looked him in the eyes without blinking. "Try to challenge it. Don't waste your money on lawyers. We've lived here for 5 years. We have rights. You have no rights to my money. You never did." Julian stormed out. Elena followed, sobbing. I went back to my study, reviewed the camera recording of the confrontation I had just captured, saved it with the date and time, and a label, evidence of reaction. The rage confirmed their guilt. The following week, the house became a battlefield. Doors slamming, hostile silence. Calls to lawyers were overheard, all saying the same thing. The trust was solid, unshakable. On April 7th, Elena attempted reconciliation. She knocked on my study door, tears welling up. "Dad, we can fix this. I'm your daughter. My daughter would never have tried to poison me. It was a mistake. Please leave my study." She left. I sat alone, staring at the wall, knowing what came next. The trust protected my money. Now, I needed to reclaim my house. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words: "Get them out of the house." That same night, I called a real estate agent, Linda Moretti, recommended by my banker for her discretion and speed. "I want to sell my house. When can we list it?" "I can see it tomorrow morning. If it's as you describe, we could list it this weekend." April 8th. She arrived with a tape measure and a professional appraisal. I walked through the rooms where my daughter and son-in-law still lived, evaluating the market value of the house they were borrowing. A lovely property. I can list it for $7 million. This market moves fast, but the property must be vacant for showings. It will be. The listing went live on April 10th. First showings scheduled for April 12th. I notified Elena and Julian via text message. Showings Friday. "You'll need to be out for 3 hours." "You're selling the house?" Julian replied by text. "Yes." There was no response. They left on Friday morning, and when they returned, they found business cards from potential buyers on the kitchen counter. Their faces registered the comprehension that I was completely dismantling their life. On April 15th, I asked Harrison to draft the eviction notice formal, legal, final, giving them 60 days to vacate. I handed it to them that night as they sat in the living room, their borrowed living room. Julian read it, his face darkening. He tore it in half. "You can't evict us. This is our home." Read the notice. "Challenge it all you want. No lease. No rent. No tenant rights. 60 days. June 15th. We'll fight this. Try it." They hired a lawyer on April 16th. I listened to their consultation call via surveillance cameras. The lawyer's assessment matched Harrison's. If there's no lease, he has grounds. You live there by permission, which he is now revoking. Harrison filed the eviction lawsuit on April 20th. The court date was set for May 3rd, 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, I rented an apartment downtown, month-to-month lease. Oceanfront. Quiet. A clean place. No grudges. I moved out on April 28th. The house became hostile territory. I stayed mostly at the apartment, returning only for necessities. On each visit, the surveillance cameras captured their desperation. Elena crying, Julian raging, both calling lawyers who had no solutions. May 10th arrived. Miami-Dade Courthouse. 3rd floor. Eviction trial. Harrison and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Elena, Julian, and their lawyer. Young and overmatched. Aware he had no case. Judge Vance took the bench. A man in his 52nd, serious-looking, experienced in seeing people try to evade consequences. Their lawyer stood. Your Honor, my clients have lived in this property for 5 years. Under what agreement? Judge Vance interrupted. His family. The plaintiff is Ms. Sterling Fox's father. That is not a lease agreement. Do they pay rent? No. Do they have a written lease? No, Your Honor. Then they are guests without a contract. Mr. Sterling has given appropriate 60-day notice. He looked at Harrison. Yes. Your Honor. Served on April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate. Judge Vance reviewed the documents. I see no legal impediment to this eviction. The plaintiff is the owner of the property. The defendants have no lease or rental agreement. Notice was proper. He looked at Elena and Julian. You have until June 15th. After that date, law enforcement can intervene. Motion granted. The gavel cracked. Final decision. In the hallway, Julian confronted me, his voice low and menacing. You'll regret this. You're destroying your own family. I am removing those who poisoned me. We'll make you pay. With what money? I walked away, leaving him sputtering in the hallway. The next 5 weeks were a tense standoff. I stayed at the apartment. They remained in the house, packing slowly, desperately searching for rental properties they couldn't afford without my help. The surveillance cameras recorded endless arguments. Elena breaking down. Julian's fury at their complete defeat. On June 14th, I received confirmation. The buyer of the house had completed the inspection and the sale was approved for closing in August. Pending possession handover. June 15th was moving day. I arrived at the house at noon. A large moving truck was in the driveway loading furniture. Elena, eyes red, face haggard, gave instructions to the movers. Julian loaded boxes, his jerky movements reflecting contained fury. They didn't even greet me. I stood on the lawn watching them load their possessions. Everything I had bought for them. Everything they had accumulated during 5 years of living off my generosity. The truck pulled away at 4. They drove off in Julian's car without looking back. I entered the empty house, the echo of footsteps ringing on the hardwood floor. No furniture, no trace of them. No trace of poison in the air. Room by room, I walked through the reclaimed space. Marks on the walls where pictures once hung. Indentations in the carpet where furniture had been. The house felt like an empty shell, contaminated by what had happened inside, but finally blissfully empty. My phone vibrated. Harrison. Eviction completed. Ready to talk civil lawsuit. I stood in the center of the living room. My living room. Looking around at the emptiness. Selling the house would erase their presence completely. But first, one more legal action. One final blow. I texted back. Yes. Let's schedule a meeting for Monday. It's time for this to be definitive. I wrote my reply to Harrison. Yes. Let's schedule the meeting for Monday. It was time for this to be permanently on the record. The empty living room surrounded me. No furniture. Just the hardwood floor and the echo. I sat down, my back against the wall, laptop resting on my knees, and opened the evidence folders one last time. Months of documentation, surveillance recordings ordered by date, hospital medical records, Mateo's statement, Veronica's reports, every conversation, every attempt at manipulation, every proof that what happened to me was not paranoia, but premeditated exploitation. I created a final chronological document, printed everything, and organized it into a tabbed, expanding folder. Each item told part of the story. Taken together, they were undeniable. On Monday morning, June 16th, I met Harrison in his office. He spread the evidence across the conference table as if it were an indictment. Civil lawsuit under Florida Statute 825.103, Harrison said, taking notes. Elder exploitation, financial manipulation, attempted battery by drugging, coercion, aggravated emotional distress, fraud, conspiracy, seeking $500,000 in damages plus costs. This isn't about money, I said. I know. It's about public record documenting what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences? Exactly. We filed the complaint on June 17th. Elena and Julian received the court notification in their new apartment, a small 2-bedroom unit in a neighborhood far removed from the luxury of Coral Gables. The process server reported they had barely unpacked. Their lawyer contacted Harrison a few days later, his voice tight on the speakerphone. My clients can't afford this. They're already ruined. They should have considered that before attempting to drug and defraud their benefactor, Harrison replied coldly. Discovery began. Harrison requested their financial records. Bank statements revealed the truth. No savings. Living paycheck to paycheck on credit cards. Drowning in debt created by their life expectations. On June 28th, the settlement offer arrived. I met Harrison in his office to review it. $50,000 payment plan. Private admission of guilt. No trial. It's reasonable, Harrison said cautiously. They clearly can't pay the full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential. No public record. I slid the papers back across his desk. No. I want this to be public. I want it on the court records forever. Trial is risky. The judge could award less compensation. I don't care about the money. I care about the record. I looked him in the eyes. They tried to destroy me. I want official record that they were wrong and I was right. Harrison nodded slowly. Then we go to trial. July became the month of preparation. Matteo confirmed he would testify. The hospital doctor provided an expert affidavit. Veronica prepared the surveillance evidence for court presentation. I gave a deposition. Hours of questions answered under oath, laying the factual foundation. July 25th. Preliminary hearing. The judge set the trial date for July 28th. That Monday morning dawned clear and hot. I dressed in my best suit and arrived early at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. Judge Hastings presided. She was in her 52nds. Known for her impartiality and strong rulings, Harrison had recommended a bench trial instead of a jury trial. Judges understand elder law better than average citizens, he explained. Opening statements. Harrison presented the timeline and evidence summary with meticulous precision. Their lawyer, young and out of his depth, argued that a family misunderstanding had been exaggerated. Matteo testified first. He described the restaurant incident with full conviction. I saw Mrs. So. Sterling Fox pour something from a small vial into Mr. Sterling's wine glass while he was away from the table. Clear. Liquid. Deliberate action. Their lawyer attempted cross-examination. Could you have been mistaken? No. I know what I saw. I couldn't keep quiet. The hospital doctor explained the diazepam analysis results. Dosage. Dangers. Veronica presented the surveillance methodology, chain of custody, and authentication of the recordings. Day 2. July 29th. The surveillance video played on the courtroom screen. Their own voices filled the space, discussing competency issues, planning Elias's consultation, and celebrating their supposed progress toward the inheritance. Julian said, "He's 63, not lucid anymore." Elena's voice said, "We deserve this money." I watched Judge Hastings take notes, her expression serious and focused. Elena testified, crying. She admitted to the restaurant incident, but claimed she only wanted him to listen to her about important papers. Julian testified. Defensive and hostile. He blamed me for overreacting to a family conflict. Then it was my turn. The witness stand felt solemn, formal, everyone watching me. I stated my name, my age, and my relationship to the defendants. I answered Harrison's questions calmly and precisely. Restaurant surveillance, trust creation, eviction. I presented the evidence one by one. Cross-examination became aggressive. "Aren't you being vengeful, Mr. Sterling? I'm seeking accountability. There's a difference." Judge Hastings asked her own question. Why pursue a civil suit after fiduciary protection and eviction? I looked straight at her. Because what they did was wrong. It needs to be on public record for my protection, as a precedent for the truth. July 30th. Closing arguments. Harrison. This is a textbook case of elder exploitation, attempted battery by drugging, financial manipulation, psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyer. Family conflict and poor judgment. Yes, but not criminal exploitation. Judge Hastings closed her notebook. I will issue the ruling in writing in 2 weeks. I left the courthouse in the late afternoon heat with the satisfaction of having completed my task. I spoke the truth publicly, presented the evidence. Now justice would decide if the truth mattered. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks wondering if the system would validate what I had suffered or dismiss it as family drama. I returned to my temporary apartment, watched the sunset over Biscayne Bay, and waited for the world to confirm what I already knew, that I had been right to protect myself, to defend myself, to demand justice. August 15th. The dawn light filtered over the ocean outside my balcony. Coffee steamed in my hand. Bitter. Familiar. Comforting. 2 weeks after the trial ended, the phone rang at 9. Mr. Sterling. Harrison. We have the verdict. I sat down. The infinite ocean stretching out before me. The judge ruled in your favor. Total victory. Clear and convincing evidence of elder exploitation, attempted financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress was found. Judgment for $350,000 plus court costs, $75,000 in punitive damages, $425,000 total. The number seemed abstract. There's more, Harrison continued. Permanent restraining order. They are prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly. No calls. No letters. No communications through third parties. Violation results in contempt charges. And the payment? They have nothing. Court-ordered payment plan. Garnishment of future wages until the debt is settled could take years. But the judgment is public record. Searchable permanent documentation of what they attempted. That's what I wanted. Not the money. Documentation. Validation. Public record that I wasn't paranoid or cruel. That I was the victim of an attack. And I had every right to defend myself. Thank you, Harrison, for everything. You did the work. I just legalized it. After hanging up, I sat watching the sunrise. The written opinion arrived by email an hour later. I read every page. Judge Hastings wrote, "The evidence presented demonstrates the premeditated exploitation of an elderly person by those in positions of trust. The incident at the restaurant, the attempt to drug someone to facilitate document signing, constitutes a felony in itself. Subsequent surveillance recordings reveal ongoing manipulation and planning. This court finds the defendant's actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum civil sanctions." Reprehensible. Maximum penalty. Public document. I printed the opinion and filed it. One more document in a case now closed. On August 16th, I closed on the sale of the Coral Gables house. Sold to a young family for $2.75 million. They will never know what happened within those walls. They will fill it with different memories, different lives, different futures. That same day, I bought a downtown apartment, 10th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, ocean views to the horizon. $850,000 cash purchase from the house sale. Modern. Impeccable. No history. I moved in on August 18th. Furniture arrived and was simply placed. Nothing excessive. Nothing unnecessary. The space felt like taking a breath after being underwater. August 20th. Last meeting with Veronica in her Pinewood office. The certification still hung on the wall. Case closed, she said, handing me a USB drive. All the surveillance recordings, reports, and documentation. Go on the record that I thank you for everything. You made it easy. They were predictable. She stood and extended her hand. Take care. Mr. Sterling. We shook hands. The matter concluded. The professional relationship was over. On August 22nd, I sat on my new balcony, phone in hand. I searched for Elena's contact, my finger hovering over the screen. Delete contact. A confirmation box popped up. I pressed yes. Her name vanished. Julian's followed. Both disappeared from my phone, from my life, from my future. The restraining order legally barred them from communication. Even if they wanted to apologize, reconcile, or explain, the law prevented it. 3 years minimum. Enough time for life to move on without them. I felt nothing. Neither satisfaction nor sadness. Just a serene peace. On August 23rd and 24th, I established new routines. Coffee on the balcony in the morning. Walks by the sea in the afternoon. Reading at night with the sound of the ocean drifting through the open windows. I called old friends I had neglected during the chaos. Made lunch plans. Reconnected. And rebuilt my social life outside of surveillance and legal battles. On August 25th, the sunset painted the sky in layers. Orange blending into purple. Then deep blue. I stood on my balcony, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the day turn into night. 6 months since February. Since that restaurant. Since Matteo's warning. The glass switch. And everything that followed. I protected my assets through the trust. Evicted them from my house. Held them accountable with a civil judgment. And put their exploitation on public record. I won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like emerging from dark waters and realizing I was still breathing. My daughter had tried to poison me. That truth weighed on me. Unchangeable. But I refused to be a victim. I refused to accept the manipulation. I refused to let trust make me vulnerable to destruction. The ocean stretched infinitely, the horizon line crisp and defined. Somewhere in the city behind me, Elena and Julian lived with the consequences. A court debt that would follow them for years. A public record that affected their job applications and background checks. A restraining order that prevented them from spinning their story or seeking reconciliation on their own terms. I didn't hate them. Hate required energy, attention, emotional dedication, all that I had dedicated to documentation, preparation, and legal battles. Now I only had peace. The sun touched the horizon. The colors deepened, and the city lights began to twinkle behind me. My coffee was cold, But I didn't move to refill it. I simply stood there, watching the cycle of nature continue, oblivious to human drama. I built an empire from nothing, sold it for $30 million, protected $25 million through an unshakable trust, lost a daughter, but saved myself. I found justice in the courts, and peace in separation. Some stories end with family reunions, forgiveness, and healing. This one ended with distance, documentation, and the relief of being safe. The sun disappeared behind the ocean, darkness settling around me. I finished my cold coffee, left the cup on the balcony railing, and watched the stars appear. Tomorrow I would call my former partner about that consulting opportunity. Next week, I would have lunch with friends. Eventually, I would date, travel, and fill my days with something other than litigation. But tonight I simply stood here, free, protected, alone, but not lonely. The ocean whispered against the shore below. The city hummed with its infinite rhythm. Life went on, indifferent to individual struggles, offering new days to those who survived old battles. I had survived, and that was enough. If you liked this story, please hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for watching.